This is test 10. When discussing common causes of clutch problems, Technician A says often problems can be corrected by properly adjusting the clutch linkage.
That's true.
Technician B says excessive clutch pedal free travel can indicate an excessively worn clutch disc. Now wait a minute. Excessive free travel means the clutch disc is worn out?
I don't believe that.
What is it? How can you tell from your clutch pedal that your disc is wearing?
I don't really know how to explain it, but I can feel it on my foot.
How's that? I'm not talking about when you're driving it, just feeling it sitting still.
I can't
Without even starting the motor.
I can't do that, man.
Yeah. Well, what happens as the clutch lining wears away? You got to think about that. Okay, let's think about that. Let's think about that for a minute. You got your diaphragm fingers right here, right? And you got your throw-out bearing resting against them. And let's just say you got the old-fashioned, throw-out fork or whatever, because the same principle we're going to apply to what we're talking about. Okay, now as the clutch wears, when you mash this, it releases the clutch, right?
Right.
Okay, now as the clutch wears, the distance between the flywheel and this heavy part of this pressure plate that pinches the clutch disc are going to get closer together, aren't they? Like if you got a nice fat clutch disc that's new, these fingers are going to be, farther in this way. As it wears out, those fingers are going to come farther out. Aren't they? I mean, doesn't that make sense? Lawrence, are you totally confused?
I got that look in my face.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times Lawrence won't even tell me he didn't understand it until later I found out he didn't because he didn't know. But if you've got a clutch disc here, I got one somewhere, and I don't see one. Where in the world happened all these clutch discs? This right here. See this thing right here? That's a clutch disc. Everybody recognize that as a clutch disc, right? Okay, the linings on that clutch disc, one side of it, this side, the side that doesn't have the spring pack on it, is going to go toward the flywheel. The flywheel is bolted to the engine. A flywheel on a manual transmission is thicker and heavier than one on a automatic transmission. One on an automatic transmission is actually expected to flex whenever the torque converter expands and contracts. That's why they call it a flex plate. If the torque converter expands and contracts too much, it's going to keep breaking flywheels. It'll do that. It breaks them right around the bolts and all that. But anyway, like I had one person email me that said, we put 4 flywheels in this truck since we put the rebuilt transmission in it that we bought. So what's up with that? And I said, you need to put another torque converter in it. That'll quit breaking flywheels. You got a torque converter probably made in China or something. But anyway, right here, as this wears, these linings get thinner. As this lining gets thinner, this part that grabs, the two parts like here are closer together. As they're closer together, because of the way that pressure plate is designed, and I need to probably put that up there on my. It's going to be hard to look at that picture that I've got here and tell what I'm talking about. But the fact is, as these get closer together, those fingers. See, as I mash those fingers in, it's going to pull this back. I mean, it's going to release this, and this is going to be hanging there with nothing grabbing it. As it wears, when you let off, it's going to be closer together, closer and closer and closer together. So what's that mean? That means the pedal is going to get tighter and tighter and tighter.
Oh, so that means your clutch is going out.
As the pedal continually gets tighter, you can, for instance, this one guy, you remember I told you this guy, Eric, bought this Mitsubishi or a Dodge Stealth, which is like a Mitsubishi 3000. And he had a stick in there, and he bought it with the heads off of it, and because he didn't pay hardly nothing for it. It was a nice, pretty decent car, and so we found out that it had jump time, bent the valves and all that. So we did a valve job on it and put it all back together, got it running. And when he was driving it, his clutch was trying to slip a little bit, and it was tight as all get out. And on that particular one, believe it or not, you can adjust the clutch.
I've got one of them.
Yeah, one of them. Oh, you got one of them dice. Oh, leave it to Wes. Wes has got 17 cars. Okay.
No, I have one.
Okay.
I don't like them. I hate them.
Yeah. Well, he worked on that one for a while, but he finally got it. All right. Here's your clutch pedal right here. All right. Now, right here, you've got a clevis that hooks to that clutch pedal. If you look at it from the top, like if this is your clutch pedal, that clevis looks like this. And it's got threads on it. Let me draw that a different way. Looked at it from the top, your clutch pedal is like this, you know, like you would be going down here. It's like you're looking down a long rod, you know, from the side it's going to be long. But right here, you're going to be looking at, it's got a pin going through it. All right.
Connect it to the clutch.
There you go. It's connected to the clutch pedal. It's got a pin that's on one side, and on the other side it's got a little cotter key or whatever, right? Okay, now right here, you've got threads. You got a nut
Oh, that's on your sled.
to lock it. Yeah, and you got threaded right here. Okay, and this right here, this rod is threaded into this clevis. Right here, that rod's threaded into that clevis, and you can loosen that and turn that, and it'll actually change the play on your clutch.
Okay, to make it grab more, what I need to do.
You're going to have to adjust it so that you've got a little free play on your pedal.
I got a lot.
Well, if you got too much free play on your pedal, you're not going to be able to fix a slipping clutch by adjusting this. Now his was right as tight as a hat band. It was right up on the very top. If you touched it, it was like stepping on a rock. Of course, you could mash it, but it didn't have any free play whatsoever. We adjusted the free play out of that one with this little clevis, and he had a clutch that didn't slip. Now it had some wear, obviously, but there was enough lining to where he didn't have any problem at all with it slipping. Before we adjusted it, when it was real tight like that, it slipped. Now, in most cases, there's not any adjustment on the clutch. And that one, I just looked under there at the pedal, and I saw that it had this thing. We broke it loose, screwed it in there. You can adjust your free play, though, with this thing right here on that clutch pedal, the ones that have it. Now, the ones like on these Fords and Chevrolets that's got hydraulic clutches, you ain't get an adjustment on them worth of crap.
Talking about hydraulic clutch, you talking about like a brake?
Talking about the one that's got a brake line going from the clutch master cylinder down to a sleeve side. Yeah. The one that he had was 94.
This was a 95.
But now this one here, I think it may have had a hydraulic clutch, but it also had this going into the hydraulic.
See that? You know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we're here. And here is Angel, the parts girl. This is not Kathy. This is Angel. You know. Where were you? Did you call her Kathy?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, that's fine. Kathy wears glasses and has dark hair.
Yeah, just Kathy. I don't know her.
Oh, okay.
She's a regular.
To lift those out of the truck for me.
You sure can. Go and help her.
He's a big boy
And Brandon, here, lay this on my desk right quick and then help her with that heavy lifting. All right.
What she got?
So, brake rotors. Anyway, that's how you do that. That one there, like I say, come to think of it, that one there had probably had a hydraulic slave cylinder, but but the push rod was going into had this adjustment on it.
That's what.
And when we adjusted it, it took care of it. But if you got a lot of free play, you're not going to be able to fix that. You're not going to fix a slipping clutch taking the free play out of it. Now, what a lot of free play is going to have is because you have gear clash if it don't release the clutch all the way.
I don't have none of that though.
All right, then well just leave it alone. You'll be all right. All right. So.
When I get on it, it slips like crazy.
That's good, ain't it? Well, that's because you need a clutch. And somebody's already tried to adjust it, and they got as far as they could out of it. They put lots of slack in it. You're going to have to get as much information from possible as possible from the owner by asking questions such as, when is the problem most noticeable? Anytime you're talking to anybody about a problem with their car, and service advisors are supposed to do this, like if you're working at a
So what's
dealership.
wrong with it,
Yeah, that's A only. The service writers are supposed to ask questions to the customer, good questions, like, did this start happening all at once? Or they're supposed to say, did it come on slowly? Or does it only do it when it's hot? Or does it only do it when it's cold? Because you can at least start gathering some information in your own mind about what's going on with the thing if you do that. They'll say, well, it only does it when it's really hot, and I've been racing down on 4th Street, against
You riding with the customer when they go?
It's a good idea if the customer's got a noise or some kind of a vibration or something they're trying to, and I'm going to tell you why that's a good idea. What I've actually done before, and I've talked about this before, I've actually worked on a doggone car for 2 hours getting rid of a rattle that wasn't even what they were talking about.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Oh,
Come on, that.
No, it wasn't. What happened? No. They would say, I have a rattle under the car. but that's all the service writer will give you.
Huh.
So you go call the service writer, you say, well, I can't get them on the phone right now, they won't be back till tomorrow afternoon. So, well, I'll try to work on it some. So you work on it a couple of hours, you find something that's rattling that bothers you, and you fix that. Well, they never even noticed that rattle. No, that ain't what I was talking about. I was talking about this rattle back over here. You know what I'm saying? So you better find out what they're wanting to fix.
What you trying to fix?
Now, if you got a safety concern, you're going to have to tell them about that too. But the fact is, make sure they're both on the same page, because they're going to be really disappointed if you fixed the rattle, they didn't give a rip about it and left something else unfixed, and they don't want to pay you if you didn't get it.
What did you say the rattle was?
Hmm?
You told us the rattle one time. You talking about emergency brake cable.
No, that was actually whenever somebody put a lot of weight in one of them Jeeps, it would the park brake cable would get out close to the wheel, and the weight would hit the park brake cable, and it would go it'd make a whenever, and it was related to wheel speed. And so if you take a little spring and you take that spring, well, there was a spring hole in the park brake cable anyway. If you shifted it over and moved it away from the drum, but it only did it when you put a lot of weight in it. A Comanche pickup would do it, or the Jeep Cherokee, but yeah, it's funny. And but anyway, when discussing self-adjusting clutch cables, Technician A says that a toothed wheel and a pawl are used to adjust a cable for clutch disc wear. See, as the clutch disc wears, the pedal gets tighter, right? Technician B says the self-adjusting unit maintains the desired amount of free play. What do you think about that?
I never heard of self-adjusting clutch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, they've got a little, up under there, right up there on the pedal, they got a plastic tooth and pawl thing that whenever you, as the clutch wears, when the free play, it's kind of like your park brake, or your adjustments on the back of the thing. It's under the dash, though. And as you keep mashing the brake, mashing the clutch, if you've got free play, it automatically keep working that free play out of it. And that's pretty handy on that. It keeps you from having to go back and fool with it. And then I don't know how many cars, I know some of the Ford cars had that on there, and I'm sure that other automakers put them on there too. But when reviewing the procedure for adjusting clutch pedal free travel, Technician A says 1 inch of free travel is normal on most cars. 1 inch of free travel is normal on most cars. Technician B says that free travel is not adjustable on cars equipped with a hydraulic linkage. Now, in some cases, it's adjustable, and in some cases, it's not on cars with hydraulic linkage. So, the answer that the book is going to want, or your handout's going to want, would be that it's not adjustable on cars equipped with hydraulic linkage, but there are some cars that have slave cylinders that are adjustable and all that. So if you're going to put the right answer, 1 inch of free travel, about right? I kind of like that. Don't you like 1 inch of free travel? Pretty much. So I would probably put A only on that one, because on some of them, on some cars with hydraulic linkage, it's going to happen. I will tell you something else too, and Wes found this out on that little car that he was working on of his, is hydraulic clutches can be a pain to bleed.
Yes, they can.
And
That's the first time, like any other clutch I've ever played, it was easy.
yeah, well, some of them are hard, and some of these S10s and stuff, if you got a standard on them, you just be prepared to get kicked around. You just about got to take, if it's got a slave cylinder down there that you can get off, you just about got to take it up and hold it up above because think about it, you're going downhill, the air keeps trying to come back uphill. See what I'm saying? Brakes have got long lines going to them, so you can pump the air on down the line. But if you're going almost, the master cylinder's here and the slave cylinder's almost strictly below it, it's going to be hard. Now, on those Fords, you remember I told you about that they got a square hole in the side of the bell housing where the linkage used to go through, and I popped that rubber cover out of that because it's rubber thing, and I'd go in there with a pry bar and get between the slave cylinder and the fingers with a big bar, and I would open the bleeder up here, and I would use let the person up here pump the clutch while I was working it down at the bottom too, and you can usually work the air out of it like that. Now what you're supposed to do on those, when you unhook the clutch line from the clutch, you can tell if the air is between the master cylinder and the end of that line by seeing if the line gets good and hard. If the clutch is super hard when you unhook it from the slave cylinder, then the air is all in the slave cylinder. But you got to work that air out of that slave cylinder. I'm telling you, some of them will smack you around. They also talk about hooking a hose to that little bleeder screw, because you know bleeder screws are made to have a hose put on them. You notice that?
I didn't know that, but
Yeah, it just works real good. Put a hose on it, and you use a vacuum pump.
like we were doing.
Yeah, and then you create low pressure in there, and the fluid's actually going to fill it up. Now that sounds good. It sometimes seems to work better than others. Now the simple fact is, you're going to bleed brakes and think, hey, I've got this down pat, and then you're going to get something like Lawrence has over there, and they're going to be done heavy down on the ground with a hammer. You know, you can work with it. Sometimes you have trouble bleeding them. You know, that's all there is to it. Now sometimes what you can do is you can jack that particular corner of the car, if you're bleeding brakes, up really high as you can jack it up. It's best if you can jack it up and get it just plumb stupid high, and everything else low, and bleed that wheel while it's really high, and the air will have a tendency to go up that hill.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? If you can jack it up real high, get it. If you can get it higher than the master cylinder, that's even better, because it'll just take off up that way, you know. And, then you can go and got to lower it and do the other side. And all that. So just help yourself that way. I like to put bleeder hoses on all 4 wheels, and put them in bottles, you know, so that the end of the hose is under the fluid in the bottle, and then pump it. And a lot of the times you can bleed the brakes like that. And don't fall in the trap. And I don't know how I got on brakes. I guess bleeding clutches. But whenever you pump, if you feel the brakes good and hard when the engine's not running, then when you start it up, you got almost no pedal.
Yeah.
So don't go there. You know, make darn sure that you've checked it both ways. Because you'll swear you got a good brake pedal. When you fire it up, you ain't got nothing. So you gotta bleed it. Sometimes you gotta bleed the car running. But you make sure you get all the air out of there, and and like I tell you, anytime you're working on anything and you just get sick of it to the point you just won't be done with it. And I will tell you something else. If you are one of those kind of people that walks away when the work gets hard, you're going to crash and burn if you're in a shop. You know, you can't do that. Now, occasionally it's okay to take a break, but that break better not last very long. You know, because what happens is that the boss man says, "What are you doing standing over here by the water cooler, or standing out here and shooting the bull with these guys whenever there's work over there that needs to be got out? We got 5 or 6 people waiting on stuff that you're supposed to do, and why are you? Well, I'm having trouble with this car right here. You know, of course they're not going to give you they're not going to let somebody do the work for you. You know. All right, so right here we got let's see. Oh, I'll tell you something else too. There was a guy that I worked for when I was at the Volkswagen place. Some of these vans had a engine in them that was like a Porsche engine, like 72, 3, 4 Volkswagen vans, and they were aggravating to pull out, and they had a crankshaft seal leaking on one, and so they gave the job to this one guy that was working there, and he didn't want to do it because it was hard. You know, he knew how to do it. I know that he didn't know how. He just didn't want to because it was a hard job. He wanted a gravy job. And so he got his car and left for the rest of the day. And then they gave it to me. And I did it. But I mean, the thing about it was, you know, that ain't good. You know, I mean, if you call yourself a mechanic, you know, and you don't want to do the hard job that needs to do. And me and Archie, we stayed here until we accomplished at least part of our objective yesterday with Archie. You ever notice how Archie just kind of keeps on going even when he's getting beat on the head by something? He just keeps on going. All right. Now then, we got, let's see, when discussing the possible causes for damage to the surface of a pressure plate, Technician A says a worn clutch disc can score the surface of the pressure plate.
Yes.
Technician B says insufficient pedal free travel can cause it to overheat. Think about that now.
I say both of them, because it can.
Both of them are right, yeah. If you got insufficient pre-travel, it's like you're riding a clutch. And it also means usually that your clutch disc is wearing out or it's got worn down some. I'll tell you something that was kind of funny about the flywheel. We had a machine shop there at the Ford place for a long time where we did all of our own cylinder head work and everything like that. We also had a machine to resurface cylinder heads where you could shave them, right? Now, a lot of you probably didn't know about that, but you could take an aluminum cylinder head like off of an Escort that's warped too much. And we had a steel plate that he had machined on he got a real thick piece of steel plate that he drilled it so that you could bolt an Escort cylinder head to it. And the machinist did this. He's a pretty sharp guy. And he put that cylinder head in this oven, clamp it down to that piece of steel plate that was the machine real flat, and he would heat it up to 850 degrees. And then he would let it cool off, and it would change the shape of that cylinder head so that it would be machinable and you could reuse it. So we would recondition those cylinder heads like that. But the fact is, a cylinder head resurfacing machine, we were got a crazy idea we were going to resurface a flywheel in there. So he puts his flywheel in the cylinder head resurfacing machine, and it's basically got this round cutter that kind of goes across the surface of it, you know. And that cylinder head is plenty flat enough for, you know, like a 302 or something like that, to where it don't leak or anything like that. But we did that with a clutch, and that was a chattering-ass darn thing. We had to get a flywheel for it. We're trying to stave off having to buy a flywheel, you know, for the customer. Gonna figure, well, why don't we just try that and see what it works? But it's not smooth enough for a flywheel. If what's smooth enough for a cylinder head is not smooth enough for a flywheel. At least when you're talking about, you know, the older engines and all that. But anyway, that's just something I wanted to touch on right there. When installing a pressure plate, Technician A says the dowel pins in the flywheel are used to hold the pressure plate in positions while it's attaching bolts are installed. You know what I'm talking about when I say dowel pins? Mm-hmm. Anybody that's ever had a clutch in their hand knows what that dowel pins are. There are some holes that are in that aren't bolt holes that are in that pressure plate, and there's some dowel pins that'll be roll pins or they'll be little solid tapered pins, and they're on opposite sides usually, or there may be 3 of them in there. And when you shove that up there, it absolutely locates that flywheel, that pressure plate exactly where it's supposed to be. And it's not all of them have it. Some of them you just kind of got to hold the darn thing up there and, you know, start the bolts, and it's close enough, good enough, and all that. But if it's that dowel pins in it, now let me ask you this, guys, and this is important too, and I need you to know that you got what else have you seen that's got dowels? It's got, in other words, besides the bolt holes, you got dowels that fit pretty snug in some other holes in the mating component. Timing cover will have some. That's a real good point. Yeah, because you remember fighting those on that Nissan. Transmission and engine. Yeah. Why are those there? Yeah. What if you leave them out? What if you lost them? What if somebody came along and says, "Hey, I think I'm going to take these dowel pins, knock them out of there with a punch," and then you said, "Where's my dadgum dowel pins?" Well, I'll just put it together without them. Is that okay? Huh?
What will it do? I don't know what it'll do.
It'll loosen the bolts up because it's 2 components will be doing it all the time. If you got dowel pins, it's not a press fit. It's not even an interference fit, but it's tight enough where there's no movement. And cylinder heads will have dowels, but not always.
I have never seen something go down there.
Ford Tempos did not have dowels. They didn't, and I don't know, but they didn't. Because I did a bunch of them, and but what I did was I got me some cylinder head bolts, and I cut them off, you know, so that they just had the threaded part, and I sawed a screw slot in the top of it, you know, with a high speed cutter, or hacksaw or whatever, and I would screw them things down in there so they were sticking up about 1/4 of an inch, and I'd put the head gasket on there, you know, they're sticking up through the head gasket, and then I bring the cylinder head around there and clunk, drop it on them things, and then I start all my cylinder head bolts except those 2. And then I do the screwdriver thing down in the hole, pull the screws out, bring them out with a magnet. I made some. Well, that keeps the head gasket from moving around, and it all. But you know, basically the dowel pin is supposed to, it helps keep the head from sliding around. Most of the time, you're going to see dowel pins on V engines where the cylinder head's going to try to slide while you're putting the bolts in. See what I'm saying? And sometimes the dowel will be a sleeve that's around one of the head bolts. So there's a bunch of ways they can do it. So intake manifolds, you know, sometimes may have a little small dowel that's just thick enough to hold a gasket in place, you know, and then they'll have a cutout in the intake. Anyway, Technician B says the dowel pins locate the pressure plate to ensure proper balance of the clutch assembly is maintained.
That's true.
He's correct about that, yeah. That's an A and a B. When examining a damaged pressure plate, Technician A says the damaged part should be removed and replaced with new ones. Examining a damaged pressure plate. Just about everywhere you go, except maybe if you go to a OEM, you know, the dealer or something, if you buy a clutch, you're going to be getting a pressure plate and a throwout bearing too, and it's going to be high usually. But you remember that story I told about the clutch that everybody in town was wanting $400 for a clutch for that little Chevrolet car, and they had one at A.M. Jackson. It's the same brand, Sachs, S-A-C-H-S. The same brand at J.M. Jackson for that car was $155, and all the parts houses wanted nearly $400. And
Just like that daggone control arm.
there you go. So all that, yeah. Wes was wanting a control arm, and the salvage yard was wanting $287 for that Nissan 240 SX control arm, and we found them at Stimpf Automotive for $53 brand new. So, you know,
With a ball joint.
with a ball joint with it, you know, outstanding, you know.
I can't get that ball joint.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. You got to replace the pressure plate. Technician A says damaged parts should be removed and replaced with new ones. Technician B says the pressure plate should be replaced. Obviously, everything's supposed to be replaced with new. If it's damaged, you replace it. That's not rocket science. When discussing the causes of rapid clutch disc, that's actually
Should be removed and replaced with both.
yeah. All of the damaged, you know, all of them should be. Typically, they're gonna, like say, everybody that makes clutches, yeah, everybody that makes clutches wants you to replace the pressure plate. But if obviously it's damaged, you're gonna replace it.
Hey, will the pressure plate wear out, Mr. Richard?
Yeah.
It will wear out?
Yeah. Now, depending on what you mean by wear out, you know,
Like from pressing the engine?
the traction surface of it is going to get scorched and all, kind of like a flywheel does.
Yeah, I know that. But
And
I
it
mean,
can crack and.
I mean,
That
will the
leads me.
springs wear out though in it?
No, not typically. I mean, most of the time they last long. I mean, last forever. But I mean, they can break, but usually they don't. I tell you what we did. You know, you've seen the ones. You know, as much of that kind of stuff as you've done, Wes. You've seen these clutch discs that have these brass buttons on them instead of the lining.
Yeah.
Well, we had this Lodestar 1800 International, craziest thing you ever saw. And this is a wild story right here. Had a gas burner engine in it, but it was a deuce and a half. It was a big old truck, but it had a gas burning engine, and it had a big old gearbox here, and it had a little drive shaft, and there was another transmission back here, and then it had the drive shaft, you know, going back to the rear wheels. This was an auxiliary transmission. So
it had more gears?
no, it had 20.
Yeah, I'm saying so it had
Yeah.
more gears. Right?
It had 20. It had, yeah, a ton of gears. So you had your, you know, your 5 gears here, but this one here had 4 gears. So you had this one going through this, and think about what that does to multiply your torque. See what I'm saying? If you put this in first, and you put this in first, second, third, and fourth, you're going to be in fifth. By the time you get in fifth gear, you know, going as fast as you can go, you're only going 20 miles an hour, wah, in fifth gear, but you're going through this thing.
But then you
And,
swap
but
that.
you don't shift this one while you're going.
Oh, okay.
You put this one in whatever range is appropriate while you're stopped, you see. But, I mean, because it's just, I mean, it's just too, you had 2 gear shifters in the floor. This one here had a gear shifter coming out of it that went up there, and this one here had a gear shifter that came out that
Something like a tractor, just like a tractor.
It's very similar, but the fact is, I had to put a clutch in that doggone thing about every 3 or 4 months.
Huh?
I don't know, them guys get burning the daggone clutch out. And this transmission right here was a stud and amongst them. And what we were having to do this was in 1979 or whatever it was, and when I was down there, we get a big old jack up under it, and we just try to hold it, balance it on the jack, and we break it. We didn't have the right kind of stuff, but I mean, every time I got down there, man, that thing falls on you, a dead man. It's a big old thing. So I had to pull his drive shaft out, had to bring that out, had to fight with all that nonsense. And one day, Wayne, the boss man, came by when I had that thing part way out or part way back in, I can't remember. He needed the truck for something, or some of his dock people did. He leaned over there and he says, how much do you lack? And I said, I don't lack none of it, Mr. Wayne, but I got to do it all. And he says, oh, crap. So anyway, I said, I'm going to put me a brass button clutch in there. I mean, with the brass buttons in there, so it won't wear out. They got brass, but I mean, the clutch disc, instead of having linings, it's a round clutch disc, and it's got some brass buttons on both sides, like several of them. I think there were 6 on that clutch. Looks just like a regular clutch disc, except for that. But down in that industrially intensive area in Port Arthur, Texas, I could get the guys at Spence Battery to come up with anything I wanted. They could make it, you know. And we had limitless reserves of money, so whatever they wanted to make for me, I'd get them to make it like that. So he gets me together, you know, they fix me up a brass button clutch. And I don't know if these knotheads, what gear they put it in or whatever, but the next time I had to pull that thing apart, the flywheel was busted in 3 pieces. And it busted the flywheel and they just really, it was grabbing good, but it destroyed the flywheel and the pressure plate. So, I mean, I guess they could tear up a steel ball with a feather. All right, so one way or another, that's what I had to do down there was keep these people from tearing stuff up. And I tell you what, your learning curve in a situation, a problem-solving situation like that, is very short. It doesn't take very long to learn whatever you need to know real fast when you're having to crank out a lot of work really quick. One day they called me and they said this Dodge pickup, it was nearly a brand new 1-ton Dodge pickup, and they had this 20,000 pound trailer behind it when it was a gooseneck, and some yo-yo had lost the key to that Dodge pickup. Both keys were lost to the Dodge pickup. And they says, we got to get this thing going. Whatever you got to do, it's got to leave here in 10 minutes. We've got no key. It's got to be gone from here in 10 minutes. And we were, 15 miles from town, and who knows when we were ever going to come up, be able to come up with another lock cylinder, probably a couple of days or whatever. And so I went out there to that thing, and in those days they had a carburetor on it. And like I say, it's nearly a brand new truck. I hooked the jumper wire to the hot side of the coil, and it backfed and powered everything up in there, including the alternator circuits and all that, the way it was wired up. And I made sure it was in neutral, and I started it with a screwdriver at the starter. Well, what problem do I still have? The steering wheel lock. I got in the truck, I grabbed the steering wheel, broke the lock so they could just drive it.
Broke the lock.
Yeah, just broke the steering wheel lock. I don't think I ever fixed that darn steering wheel lock. But the fact is, we got it going. I mean, don't whine to me about how I can't do this, or it won't work, or the bolt's rounded off. I don't want to hear that nonsense. I mean, you're working in a situation like it, you figure it out, you fix it, and I need it in a
grabbed
certain
that steering
amount of
wheel
time.
and broke the lock.
Yeah, I just grabbed it and busted it. On the Dodge, it wasn't. I knew it was just this peg stick coming up through there. It was pewter. It wasn't hard to break. I mean, it's not like it took Superman to break it,
I tried to break one before, it don't work.
But, well, not on the ones they got now, they're stronger, but on that one I broke it. But, I mean, I'm not saying I could break it on just any truck now, but on that truck I knew I could because I knew how it was put together. But one day they told me, they says the red and white Dodge truck is down at offshore diving and salvaging, and it's dead in the water. I don't even remember what was wrong with it. I'd already called in my hamburgers at the cafe. And they says, you and Kent go down there and you get that doggone truck going, and I mean right now. I mean, this was like, don't wait until after lunch. You know what I mean? So I says, well, fiddlesticks. So I didn't have no cell phones or nothing, but I says, and so I went and, I don't even remember what the deal was with the truck, but I remember that my hamburgers were called in, and I was worried about that. Me and Kent had both called in hamburgers, and Joel Hart was the big fat guy that was the controller. So I picked up the phone, I called Joel Hart, and I said, Joel, I called in a couple of hamburgers to Sabine Cafe. Me and Kent are not going to have time to eat before we go to offshore diving and salvaging and getting that pickup. So what I need you to do is go by Cafe and buy those hamburgers and French fries we ordered and eat them. He says, okay. And so, and Kent says he's not going to do that. I said, you don't know him like I do. And he went to find out, and Joel bought them both them hamburgers, ate them both, and ate all the French fries. Big old fine hamburgers too. He ate two. Well, he got a reason to. You see, they didn't want to be wasted, so and he paid for them. I wasn't going to buy it or anything. All right, so when discussing the causes of rapid clutch disc wear, Technician A says driving habits influence how long a clutch assembly will last. No, certainly not. Come on. Yeah, right. Technician B says that an insufficient Technician B says insufficient pedal free travel will cause the disc to wear rapidly. Who's right about that? You'll wear it out really quick like that, or something. All right. When reviewing the procedure for installing a clutch disc, Technician A says the clutch disc should always be installed with its hub and springs toward the engine. This is the hub and the springs. This is what I was talking about before. Notice how it's flat on that side. Matter of fact, if you look real close, you'll see words on here that says flywheel side, and that's the flat side. I've seen people put them together the other way.
How?
And when they'll cram them in there any kind of way they will, and it'll wear the end off these springs and mess them up and all that, and tear up the bolts on the flywheel. Yeah. The word dummy comes to mind. Okay. I tell you something. You got to watch how you're putting that stuff together, and not just get in a hurry and think. If you're not paying attention, or if you're mad at your girlfriend or something like that, you can be thinking about something else when you're putting something really important together. If you're working in the dark, you can mess up the line trying to screw it into the radiator and all that. Always use a drop light and don't work in the dark. Is that right? Mr. Ballard, you know. Okay. When discussing ways, wait a minute, we didn't do that one. Technician A says the clutch disc should be installed with its hub and springs toward the engine. Wrong. Technician B says the splines of the disc should be clean and never oiled or greased.
The splash should be oiled and greased.
I wouldn't oil and grease them because that oil and grease is because it's gonna get hot and sling off and get on the
I
lining.
got some clutch discs that they sent grease with.
Yeah.
Why
Well,
did they do that? I didn't put it on there though, but.
I don't like that personally, and you know, it depends on whoever it is that made it. I don't know if some yo-yo that packed it.
It was
Now you might want to put a little bit of high temperature grease on there, but I put them together dry. I don't like that grease slinging. That grease will sling out of there and get on the lining and make it chatter and all that. Bad news, man. When discussing ways to determine if a pilot bushing is faulty, be right. When discussing ways to determine if a pilot bushing is faulty, technician A said that if it operates quietly, it does not need to be replaced.
True.
Come on. If it operates quietly, you're not going to hear a clutch bushing can be loose and sloppy and be no good and be quiet as a mouse. The noise the bushing makes is not going to mean anything. Like a bushing don't make a lot of noise; it just causes a lot of problems. And let's see, technician B says the careful inspection of the transmission input shaft can determine the condition of the pilot bushing. Well, yes and no. I mean, if you would put B only, I probably wouldn't have pressed you too hard for that, but you can look at the input shaft where it goes up in the pilot bushing and usually tell if there's a problem, but some of those bushings are made out of sintered brass, and they can actually wear out without damaging the input, see? But a lot of them nowadays, as I heard, most of them has got needle bearings in there. And when those needle bearings that are in there go away, they're going to start screwing up the end of that shaft, and you can look at it and tell that there's a problem. If this thing looks crappy, you better be looking at that part up in there. I always look at it anyway. When installing a new release bearing, well, that's going. If you put B only, I'll be happy with that. When installing a new release bearing, technician A says the outer surface of the transmission's front bearing retainer should be lubricated. You know what the front bearing retainer is? Come on.
On the front of the transmission?
That's where that's the collar that the throwout bearing slides on, and those things wear out. You know, they need to be greased. That does need to be greased. So that, as a matter of fact, there's a place up in that throwout bearing.
That may have been one of the grease before.
Probably so, but it wasn't for the splines on the disc. But inside that throwout bearing, you got this collar right here, and inside that throwout bearing, where it slides on that collar, there'll be a little place like this, that goes all the way around, and the grease is supposed to be packed in there, so that whenever this is sliding, it's
A lot of them got a grease fitting on it.
Sometimes they do, yeah. And have you ever seen on some of these tractors, they'll have a doggone cup out here that's got real fine threads on it. It's a cap, and it's screwed in here, and there's a line snaking down here going to the throwout bearing, and you can actually screw this cap off. It's got real fine threads, and it'll screw a long way down, but you can screw that cap off of there and pack that full of grease, and every so often the operator is supposed to make a turn on that cap, and it pushes grease down in there. You see what I'm saying? It's a cap, and it's going to be about a little bigger than about like almost 50-cent piece, maybe a little smaller. And it'll, y'all know what a 50-cent piece is, don't you? Okay, some of you do, some of you don't. How many of you ever seen a $500 bill? I had one laying on my desk the other day. I could have showed you. I got a picture of it. But anyway, this thing right. What's funny about that? I really did. I got a picture of it here on my camera. Yeah, you saw it on Facebook. I put it on Facebook. Yeah, I posted it. All right. So anyway, technician B says the outer surface of the transmission's front bearing retainer should be lubricated. Technician B says, excuse me, that was technician A. Technician B says the release lever and pivot should be lubricated. Now, what is the release lever and pivot? This is old stuff. I'm talking old stuff here. You don't hardly see that. You ever seen this? There's a ball. And then your release lever comes over here, and it's actually got a little metal part that holds it, and it's got a little socket for that. And then you got your fork right here that grabs your throwout bearing, and then you got a place where this is pushing. that pivot right there is actually, excuse me, is pushing that way. That pivot right there is made so that when it pushes against that, you know, and the clutch will be, actually, I drew that totally wrong. The clutch will be over here. I mean, the throttle bearing will be over here, and you'll be pushing here, but you'll be pushing against that. So you better put some grease on that ball. All right. You got it? All right then. So, is everybody pretty well happy with that? Did you? But, can you smell in that ATF4 fluid the same smell that you're smelling there? You can smell the same smell, can't you? That's what's in that fluid. And so your torque converter clutch is that modulated slip. If it doesn't have that friction modifier in the fluid, let's say somebody changes the fluid and they put the wrong kind in there, you're going to feel it click. No, it's going to go brrr, or it's going to surge. Feel like an EGR surge. That's what it feels like. And so typically, if you got one that's got a screwball surge to it, you need to check the service history on the vehicle. Did somebody just change the transmission oil, or has it ever been serviced, and all that. You pull the stick out. You go to smell that. Remember, Jimmy was, and Ford had those too. Ford got some fluid that's got that stuff in it. And when I told Jimmy, how did you know that transmission that came from Ford had the wrong fluid in? He goes, I could smell it. It didn't smell right, and he knew it had the wrong fluid, and he knew that's when it was surging. See what I'm saying? So a good transmission guy. And I've actually seen them where we would on these Mitsubishi cars. There was one that was doing a surge that I drew a ticket on, and this surge, and I said, this feels like an EGR surge, but I went and pulled the service history on that particular vehicle, and I pulled because they always had it in there for work, and when I pulled it out, I saw that Kevin, our transmission guy, had done a transmission service, and I looked and I said, what ticket number, X number, whatever it was, I said, what fluid did he get to put in this transmission on this Plymouth Laser or whatever it was? And he said it was they got this kind. I said, he put the wrong fluid in it. So you got to go back and redo the transmission service, get rid of the surge. They gave it to me for drivability, but I didn't burn a bunch of my time fooling with all of the other stuff. I looked at the transmission because I could tell by the feel of it that the transmission torque converter was what doing that. Also, if you can disengage the torque converter on somebody by just tapping the brake and disengage the torque converter and that surge goes away, then you can pretty much figure you've got a transmission concern. See?
So how long did it take you to figure that out?
That particular one, I figured it out real quick because I had already beat my brains out on an Eagle Summit that had the same problem, and we changed the transmission fluid and fixed it. So I basically had prior knowledge in that. If I hadn't had it, I might have been kicking myself in the head trying to figure out what was wrong with the engine.
How long did it take you to do the Eagle one?
On the Eagle Summit was a brand spanking new car, and this thing was it was an '89 model, and we had just got them. And the people said they were noticing that the speedometer would do this. I mean, probably the tachometer would do this a little bit. And then the more they drove it, the more they got to where they could feel it. And the car was so new. And what was stupid about it was there was some kind of a surge here, but I didn't see any EGR issues or nothing. And just for grins, I cleaned the fuel injectors because I had a fuel injector cleaning machine that we used for Ford, and I adapted it to clean these. And what was so stupid about it and so crazy, I cleaned the fuel injectors and it seemed to take care of it. And they drove it for a couple of days and it seemed to do better. But it got back to doing it again, so they brought it back, and I said, well, you got a brand new car now. Like I say, we didn't have any of these cars out there hardly. We were Eagle dealer too, which Eagle is kind of like used to be a division of Chrysler and Jeep and all that. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go a little deeper into this. So I went deeper into it and got to looking at it. And we called this guy Dave Farley in New Orleans, and we were talking about this surgeon thing. I said, I noticed that I got my dwell meter connected to the wire going to the torque converter, and I actually see that the torque converter is providing various more current, like a dwell reading that I can actually read. So this is not a straight lockup on his torque converter. And he said, we've been talking to some engineers about this thing. What we want you to do is we want you to go ahead and change the transmission fluid and put Mopar Plus in it, which is, had some of the friction modifier in it. And of course, at the time, me and Philip Johnson thought that was kind of silly. And we sort of gave him the big hoss laugh, but who was going to pay us to do it? So we went ahead and changed the fluid, and it just smoothed as silk. And so having done that, I fought with that for a little bit before we figured it out. And when I drove that other one, I thought, well, this just feels just like that Summit, like a year or two before. And so right away, I figured out that it was transmission fluid and not an engine surge because of where I had been. And I also saw it on a Ford Taurus, felt like a surge. But you can unplug the EGR valve and it still surges the same way. And I put my portable vehicle analyzer off the SBDS machine on it, this big old thing that you hook up. And when I noticed that when the EGR was engaged, it wasn't doing it. It was when the torque converter was coming in. I saw you know, the difference in the RPM, when you could actually see it in the trace on that recording. And so, you know what I did? I took some of that friction modifier you were smelling just a second ago that stinks so bad, and I poured a little bit of that in the transmission, smoothed it right out.
Oh, so you didn't change the fluid?
No, well, at the time, you know, I was just scratching around trying to see if that's what it was. And later on, they got to where we would change the fluid duct. Now, the Crown Victorias do feel like you're running over those speed breakers before you come to a stop sign. Boom, boom, boom. You know, they feel like that. So you got to kind of parse that stuff. The people that do that kind of stuff every day, or, you know, push, pull, snap, click, they know right away what's wrong with it and all that. So, but anyway, certain transaxle symptoms can be fixed by updating the software in the transmission controller. Here's another thing, guys, another Chrysler story. I'm working in the service bay now here, and this guy was going to, and I told y'all heard me tell this story, some of you have, but this guy's going to buy this Dodge pickup truck, and it's a diesel, and it's got electronic transmission in it, and it's got a throttle position sensor out here where the transmission controller is actually paying attention to the throttle position sensor, so it'll know what to do for the shift schedule and all that. And he was saying he drove the Dodge truck, and it was going down the road and would, you know, hunt in and out of fourth, from third to fourth, or either that or the torque converter clutch was coming in and out, something like that. Right up there at the highest gear, it was hunting in and out. And so he didn't like that. He goes, I'll buy the truck if you can get it fixed right away, because I want to pull a trailer with it, and I'm scared to drive it with it doing all that kind of stuff. And we were swamped in the shop back there where I was working, you know, the transmission guys were. And so they took it to some transmission shop and says, can you knock this out really quick? Because they were terrified they were going to build a sell truck. And so they said, put a throttle position sensor on it, and if that doesn't do it, we'll have to tear into it, you know, which, whatever. So they brought it, and they said, hey, I'll tell you what we got. We got a thing hunting in and out of fourth gear, and I remember they told me your model Dodge truck. So I went to the Mopar Diagnostic System, which is the computer that's hooked into Chrysler and all this kind of stuff. And I went in there and hooked the DRB up and bridged it to the machine, and it pulled the serial number out of there. And Mopar Diagnostic System says, by the way, did you know this truck's got a technical service bulletin on it? And I said, wow, I wonder what that is. So I clicked and opened up the technical service bulletin, and it said, the transmission hunts in it from the third to fourth gear going down the road, and if you reflash the engine controller, it'll change the shift schedule, and it'll take care of that. I said, hey, this won't cost anything. Let me go ahead and do it. And so I told the DRB, and, you know, I said, I want to reprogram and put this calibration in there. You know, it's basically, you know, and how the system worked, it wasn't hard to do that. And I just let it, you know, whirl through and work out. And they drove it, and it was fixed. And that's all it was. And one of the salesmen, the guy that was selling the thing, came back there, and he gave me a gift certificate to Longhorn for a steak dinner. Because the thing about it was, he took care of it quick. And I'm going to tell you, well, a lot of the other guys will be beating their head against the wall trying to wing it. I'm always telling you guys, it's a whole lot better off to go to the book than it is to wing it. If you wing it, you're going to fall on your face, you're going to look like an idiot, and you're going to have a mechanic and another cell says, why didn't you look at this TSB? You know, and Sam over there, that's the guy that is a state trooper now, you know, he had started out for whenever he first went to work over there at the Chrysler place over at Chevrolet place in Andalusia. They had all these instrument clusters that were dying, and they were changing out instrument clusters left and right and not fixing anything at that particular point. And so I had taught him here, always check your technical service bulletins to see what you got. So he went and looked at fuses, didn't see anything else. We went and looked at technical service bulletins, and it said if you got instrument clusters not working, reflash to, you know, PCM, and they'll take care of it, you know, whatever. So he did a reflash, and everything came online. And they were so happy because of the fact that it took care of the TSB, and the reflash took care of the problem. And that 6 or 7 instrument clusters have been replaced. Blocker, what's his name? All right, put that other video on there. Okay. But anyway, check for TSBs and related transmission software updates for the next time, you know, anytime you can't have availability to work on that. Here's something else you'll do. There's no use in wasting a lot of your time if there's a bulletin on it. Even if your shop can't fix it, if you find a bulletin, you can say, look, this problem that we're trying to fix right here may be a waste of our time because there's a bulletin that requires a dealership reflash. Now, we can reflash stuff here, a lot of stuff. There's some stuff that you can't even reflash with a Cardac programmer, so you got to be able to pick your battles on that, you know. Now, just make sure you understand it. technical service bulletins, a lot of the time if you got a crazy little transmission thing, I'm not talking about a transmission slipping or something like that, but if even, but always look at your TSBs because the reflash will take care of it. Now, the transmission simulator is going to be tool number 8333, and what you do is you plug that thing into the wire harness and you just turn the knobs and you can tell it which gear you want it to be in, basically, and that's going to tell you if the transmission is working right. You take the transmission computer out of the loop and you become the transmission computer, right? So that's going to be B. You're going on B. 45 RFE is the other transmission you can use it for. Right? All right. It connects to the 41 TE wire harness and then the 42 LE and so forth. And there's little overlays with it and all that, but you're probably not going to be using a lot of those things unless you really work in a. If you work in a dealership and you're doing transmission stuff a lot, you're going to see that. All right, so you got. Let me move on down here to the next one here. Number 4 is going to be. You got to select set the torque converter break-in adjustment after replacing the torque converter on the 2000 model NS vehicles. Now you got to love these Dodges because in some of the GMs they're going to do this. They're going to have all these letters. They got JA, NS, JX, JA, and all that. And if you ever look at the Chrysler shop manual, that's the way they got it, laid out, and that'll be basically a particular family of vehicles, like your Dodge Dakota is a particular one. And I don't even try to memorize that stuff. If you're doing it every day, you'll be able to do it. If you look in the book, you'll be able to figure it out. So I don't fight with that too much. What changes was made to the differential on the 41 TE?
What number is it?
That's number 5. I talked about that earlier.
Oh, that's a piece differential.
That's a 2-piece differential. Okay, when checking clutch clearances, let's just whip onto that one because you don't have any way of knowing that without knowing. When checking clutch clearances with the input clutch pressure fixture, you're going to apply shop air to the fixture at how many? 30 psi. 30 psi. Right? All right. Torque converter break-in adjustment is done, by the way, with the DRB3, and that's pretty important. It's actually got clutches in there. Is what it's got. All right. Now let's go on down here. We can look through the other questions here. The solenoid pressure switch assembly has been upgraded. How can you tell if it has the upgraded unit? Did you read that? How can you tell if it's got the upgraded unit from the previous version? That's question number 7. The sound shield and separator plate are not used with the revised assembly. The sound shield and separator plate.
Where's that at?
That's going to be on page number. Look at, where the speed, where it talks about the speed sensors?
I found it.
See that? Where it says solenoid pressure switch assembly? And Tyler's over there with no handout. No handout. Bad idea. Right. All right. In addition to the strengthened joint between the front carrier and rear annulus gear, and that's a real fouled up bunch of spelling there on that question. How has the front carrier rear annulus assembly been improved? I talked about that early on. Did anybody pick up on that?
Yeah.
Spawns on the front carrier or heat treated.
Heat treated. There you go. You got it. In identification code for the 41 TE, what do the 3 digits immediately following the K stand for?
A.
That's going to be an A. And then finally, the last one, information about the correct type of ATF to use in a particular application can be found where? In the owner's manual, the owner's guide, service manual, owner's guide, are on the transmission dipstick. And it's pretty handy that they put it on the dipstick. Some of the manufacturers are pretty handy to do that. Okay. Now then, we made our way through all of that test and we did not surely die.
Y'all want to do another season?
Yeah, we can. Let's do that.
All right.
All right.